Welcome to the first episode in the Control Rig IK series, and today, we're gonna go ahead and create some basic controls for our feet, which are going to allow us to actually manipulate our feet, and they're gonna be following along with our controls. And this is just for the debugging, and in the upcoming episodes, we're gonna actually apply this in the real world. So yeah, let's go ahead and let's get started. So for this whole control rig thing to work, we actually need to enable two plugins. So if we would go to our settings under the plugins section, we need first to look for a control rig plugin. So make sure you enable this. And also we're going to be using a full body IK plugin. So enable that one as well. Now both of them at this point are still in beta, so there might be some bugs with it, but this is something that's probably going to stay in the future. So yeah, there will be slight changes between Unreal Engine 4 and 5, so this tutorial might not work one-on-one with Unreal Engine 5, but for the most part it's super close. I've done this in both projects. There are just a couple of nodes that are named slightly bit differently. Okay, so with that out of the way, enable your plugins, restart your engine, and once you do, you should be able to right click in your content folder, and under the animations you should have a control rig option available. So let's go ahead and let's create ourselves a new controller rig. Select the control rig, create, and I'm gonna call this my rig. Let's open this up. And so we are inside of our control rig. Now by default it's completely empty. So let's go ahead and let's import a skeletal inside of this control rig. So we can click on the import hierarchy key and look for our skeleton. For the tutorial I'm gonna be using a SK mannequin. Click OK, and there we go. We have our guy with all of his bones. Okay, so that's good. Now we already have some default IK bones that technically we could use, but obviously other skeletons probably will not come with this. So let's go ahead and let's create our own controls and our own stuff, as if, well, these didn't even exist there. So I'm gonna right click somewhere in the free space, and I'm gonna go to the new, and I'm gonna create myself a new control. And I'm going to rename this to IK root. So this is going to be a root for my foot, basically. And well, by default, it places it over here, where is the 000 of our character. But well, we actually want to bind this to something else so that it is next to our pelvis. So we're going to use W key to use the moving tool, and we're going to move this up to roughly the middle of our character. This is where the pelvis bone should be in the skeleton. We can have a look at it if we scroll up and click on the pelvis. Here is the pelvis bone. So we want to move it roughly next to it. And then we can right click it and go to set initial transform from closest bone. And what that will do is it will change its position. So its pivot point, because right now its pivot point is over here. So if we would compile, boom, you can see it goes back down. And you can also see on the right side, we have the current transform. You can see that the Z value is changing because we are offsetting it kind of in a way. So we can just now, once it's near the pelvis, we can right click, set initial from closest bone, and boom, it instantly snaps it there. And now you can see that the current transform is at zeros because it thinks it's at its pivot point in a way. And also, it does apply the offset transform from the actual skeletal's pivot point itself. And once we have set this current transform at these 0 values over here, that means that now we can move this around, and whenever we compile, it's going to go back to that location where it's kind of attached to. It's not really attached to that bone, but now it thinks that this is its pivot point. Okay, so we have the control for the root. Now let's go ahead, let's create two more controls for our feet. So I'm going to right click on the IK root, go to the new, and create myself another new control. And I'm going to rename this to, let's call this IK foot underscore L. And I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to call this IK foot underscore R. So one for the left foot, one for the right foot. Now let's bring these down to the ankles, because those are going to be the things that we are going to control to align our feet. So I'm going to bring this down. So this one is going to be the left one. And again, I'm going to bring this next to the ankle because I already know that my foot bone, so if we locate our foot, This is where the ankle is. So that's where I want to attach this to. So I'm going to right click again, set initial transform from closest bone, and boom, now it snaps to the location where the ankle actually is, well, the foot bone. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the right foot as well. Bring it roughly over here from the closest bone. Boom, here we go. It's attached to it. Okay, so that seems to be good. Other than the fact that I see some rotations are a bit off, but I believe that's because of the way how the skeleton is rigged. I believe in this default one the axes don't really perfectly match up, but well, we're gonna see how that turns out in the end. Maybe we will have to do some tiny adjustments when it comes to rotations. Now technically we could change some of these properties. We could change the offsets from -170 to 0, and I believe there should be no difference. But anyway, we're gonna attach this to our bone, so I think that doesn't really matter that much. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's start off by attaching these controls to the bones themselves, like for real, because now they're just placed there in default, but once the animation takes over, the character's feet are gonna move, but the controls are gonna stay in those positions. And we want our controls to constantly keep track of the feet and follow along with them. And then along the way, well, we're gonna apply some tiny bit of changes to align the feet with the ground. But for now, let's just make sure that the controls are constantly following. So from the forward solve, I'm gonna do a sequence because we're gonna do multiple things. And so first, what we wanna do is we wanna go ahead and set the transform of the control. So we're gonna grab our IK foot L, we're gonna bring it in, and we're gonna set the control. Unconnect that and connect this to the execution. And then we're gonna need to grab our foot left. So we're gonna grab our foot left bone. We're gonna get its transform, and we're just gonna directly plug it in over here. So what this is gonna do, it's constantly going to track our foot, and it's always gonna adjust the control with the foot. So whenever the foot moves, the control will move as well. And we can see that now if we would select our left control, you can see that we can no longer move it around. It's constantly stuck there. We can still move the other one because it's not bind yet. So let's go ahead and let's bind it to the bone as well. So I'm going to copy and paste these two nodes, connect them up in a line like so, and change the bones. So from the foot left to foot right, and from the control foot left to IK foot right control. There we go. And as you can see now, the axis swapped back because, well, it takes over the rotation of the bone. So yeah, the changes that I made previously over here don't really take no effect whatsoever. Okay, so that's good. So everything seems to be all good over here. Now there is a last step that we need to take, which is, so right now we are tracking the location of our feet and applying it to the controls, and then in the middle we're going to do all kinds of calculations based on the slopes of the surfaces, and at the very end we need to go ahead and apply those changes to our mannequin. So for that we're going to use a node called full body IK. If you don't have this node, that means you didn't enable the plugin, so the second plugin that I mentioned at the start of the video. And here we have this node. Now it looks very tiny, but it's going to get very big very quick. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to specify a root bone for this full body IK. So we're going to open this root and we're going to use bone for the type, and the bone is going to be our pelvis bone. We're going to use pelvis. If you're using a different mannequin, different skeleton, go ahead and select your second bone under which all the other bones are basically living under. So in my case, that is the pelvis, and every other bone is below it. Okay, so that's for the root. Now we need to go ahead and also give it an effectors. So basically the things that are going to have some effect on it. So in our case, our feet are going to change based on the controls. So we need an item, and the item type is, well, we're changing our foot now. So we're going to select our left foot, foot L bone. As you can see, it instantly bends our character like so. That is because, well, we never applied any position or any rotation. So let's go ahead and apply those. And we can apply those simply by grabbing the values from the controls. So we can get our control. Let's open up the transform because all we need is the rotation. So we can plug in the rotation and the translation into the position, and boom, our character goes back to normal. Now we have 2 feet, so we need another effector. So I'm going to add another pin. We have another item, again a bone, but this time this is the foot right bone. And again, the character bends because we need to apply the controls values. So we're going to grab the right foot control, we're going to get it, split the transform pin, and plug in the rotation and the translation into the position. And there we go, our character is back to normal. Now I want to apply some constraints to this whole thing. These will take more effect later on. That's so that our pelvis, so our back of the character, doesn't really bend very awkwardly. So we're going to add a constraint to this. If the node disappears, zoom out, zoom back in. And we need an item for this constraint, which is again our pelvis. So we're going to give it some constraint a little bit. And we're going to apply some angular stiffness to this guy. And we're going to change the values from 0s to 1s. And that's basically all that we are going to do. So that's it for the full IK. So now let me show you what we are kind of going to be doing. So here we are going to be doing all the calculations, but that's going to be for the next episode. For now, let me just show you how this actually whole thing is going to work. So first, we want to go ahead, and once we have tracked our feet, we want to go ahead and apply some minor changes to the already existing transforms that we have. So we're going to grab our left foot, and we're going to set actually, let's add an offset. Let's add an offset to this control, like so. So we're going to apply some extra units to this whole thing. And to apply some extra units, well, we're going to need a point from which we can grab those, because technically we could go and be like, okay, let's grab our foot control, right? And then let's split these open, and let's do translation plus. Let's add a vector of, let's say in the z-axis, like 50 units, and then plug it in. Boom. So it brings it over there. That's because the axes are wrong. So the z is the blue one. We need the x to go up. So instead of being a z, we want to do x 50. There you go. Our foot just came up. 50 might be a bit much. There we go. And instead of maybe global, we could change this to local space, and this would give us some better results. As you can see, if we want to bring it forward, so we need, in the green axis is forward, green axis is y axis, so we do 40 over here, and there we go, our character's foot is getting moved forward. Another option is creating another control. So let's real quick disconnect this bit. Let's create ourselves a new control. I'm going to leave it be named the same way. All I'm going to do is just move it roughly to the front of it, like so. And what I want to make sure of is that the rotations are the same, as in the axes are pointing the same way. So let's have a look. The blue one is pointing to the left, so we want to rotate this 90 degrees. Otherwise, we're not going to get perfect control when it comes to up, down, left, right, like you saw over here. So the Z technically should be up, but because of the rotations of the bones, whenever it got created, the rotations don't really match up with the usual axis. So once we can see that those are in the same, we can right click this, set initial from the, whoops, not the closest bone, my bad. Let's bring it back. Let's rotate it back again. So that's a mistake on my part. Instead of from the closest bone, from the current, we want to apply that this position is the root position. And then we can actually grab our new control. We can get the control and apply the offset like so. And let's change from global to local space. And what that does is basically now whenever we move forward, our foot moves forward. As you can see, it follows along with this. There we go. So this is what it's going to look like. So we're going to be doing some things like this. So we're going to be applying all kinds of logics based on the slopes. And then thanks to these controls, we're going to be able to move our feet around like so. And yeah, that's going to be it for this episode. So I'm going to get rid of this testing piece that I added over here. Also, I'm going to remove this new control as well. And in the upcoming video, well, we're going to start applying this to our character. We're going to combine the rig with the character's animation blueprint and start doing some math to adjust our pelvis and all that good stuff. So thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I see you in the next one.